My name is JC Sylvie, and welcome to the Loudoun Impact Podcast. We interview purpose-driven leaders right here in Loudoun County, Virginia. My guest today is Neil McNerney. Neil is a professional counselor. He is a parental consultant, trainer, speaker. Neil, you also have a book underneath your belts there, and you have a article. You're a writer for the local newspaper there. You've got a weekly or monthly article talking about counseling issues. Neil, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And I had the opportunity to listen to some of your previous podcasts, and I tell you, I am intimidated with the great leaders that you've had on this show so far. So,
well, that's
we'll
nice
do our best.
That's nice of you to say, Neil. But we're excited about having you. It's a little bit different having a mental health expert on the show, but I think it's appropriate during these times. A lot of issues these days. But before we get into that, I want to introduce you to my audience a little bit more, and so they can get to know you. And let's start by you can tell us a little bit about how you ended up in Loudoun County.
Sure. So I am a pretty much Northern Virginia native, grew up in Vienna, and went to school, got my bachelor's and master's degree from JMU. And then got a second degree in marriage and family therapy from Virginia Tech while I was a school counselor. So I started my career as a school counselor in Fairfax County. Realized I'm not a great multitasker, and school counseling is a lot of multitasking, and what I really enjoyed was the actual counseling work. So I got another degree in marriage and family counseling so that I could then open up my own shop, basically open up my own practice and see families. So probably, 2/3 of what I do is clinical work is what we call it, where I'm meeting with teenagers and their families and doing couples work, trying to help create change within families. I've been in the Loudoun County area for quite a while, since about 1994, we moved here. But I really only opened up my practice here in Leesburg in the last 2 or 3 years. I had been in Reston and Fairfax area for a long time, but really just wanted to come home. It seemed like so much of what we were doing here, raising a family, being involved in the community, was about here. So I've transitioned my practice full time to the Leesburg area.
Oh, good for you. Neil, I think counseling is a unique calling. It's not something that anybody can really jump into. So what was it about your childhood that made you get into that profession? And what was it like at the McNerney family as a kid at the dinner table?
Sure. It was a fairly standard Vienna, Northern Virginia family, I'd say. My unique situation was my mother was a professional pretty much since her 20s. She had gone to work and was an executive for quite a while. So I kind of was raised in a family with two people that were working professionally, which was, back in the 60s and 70s, not as common.
Right.
I struggled particularly in high school. I seemed to do pretty well in elementary, and then beginning in middle school and then in high school, I really began to struggle with, particularly with academics, and just continued to have difficulties with that pretty much through high school. And I think that might have been the beginning of my interest in working particularly with middle and high school students. People would call me lazy. They'd say, that what I call the P word, which is he has so much potential, which I never liked that word.
Right.
Because I struggled. What I learned was, I had a combination of attention deficit disorder, and back then nobody knew what that was.
Right.
We knew who the hyper kids were, but I was never really hyper. So I had attention deficit disorder that kind of began to drift into, because I wasn't being as successful, kind of low motivation kid. And so I think once I realized, once I went to college and realized that there are actual jobs where you can help people by talking with them about these things and helping them create change in their lives, I was like, okay, I'm all in. I'm interested in this, because I had no idea, that there was even such a position. We knew about psychiatrists, but the idea of that there are counselors out there that you could talk to help, you change things in your life. I dove in at that point.
Right. My wife actually was at a talk that you hosted at a local middle school, and she said thank you for your time. And she said she was actually really excited when I said that, when I told her that you were going to be on my podcast, because she's a big fan of yours. She
Awesome.
reads your stuff. She, like I said, she went to that seminar that you hosted at the middle school. So you're doing a lot of volunteering, correct, for those schools?
Yeah. So, I love the work that I do in my office.
Mm-hmm.
But it never felt like enough to be able to help create change in people's lives. And that was what kind of drew me to writing a couple of parenting books. And then it also drew me to, doing a lot of presentations at schools. So, I've been at most of the Loudoun County school, middle and high schools, a good number of the elementary schools as well,
Mm-hmm.
during their PTA meetings, or that the school counselors will have me come out for a parent coffee. I just think we are so well trained for our professions, but really nobody trains us for this parenting thing. And the concept of leadership, when we think about who we're leading, the most important people we're leading in our lives are our children. And we just don't end up with a good idea of how to do that. So that's when I started doing presentations, which obviously not doing any at this point.
Right.
But I love being able to get up in front of a group of parents and just talk about, there's another way of doing this, that it is not so exhausting, and is much more based on leadership principles than just trying to get our kids to do things.
Sure.
So yeah, so I do that quite a bit throughout the county. I'm also on the Community Services Board, which most people in the county don't know what it is. So every opportunity I like to mention what
Sure.
it is.
Yeah.
It's a group of individuals who are residents of the county who have been selected by the Board of Supervisors to provide feedback on mental health, substance abuse, and developmental services issues. We provide feedback to the Board of Supervisors, and we also provide feedback to the agency, the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Agency. Mm-hmm. And that's very satisfying. That feels very good. We've done a lot of work on recommendations for how to reduce teenage suicides. We had a horrible series of suicides probably in the past 5 or 6 years. And
Yep.
We really took it upon ourselves to figure out what can we do to help prevent this, to help at least reduce it. So that's a great organization. The Department of Mental Health, I think, is one of the unsung heroes in the county, because they tend to work with the poorest and the people that have severe mental illness. And it's a blessing that we have that for them.
That's
just
tough,
to be able
right.
to get some help and stability.
Right. So let's get back to leadership during these times of COVID. And I see a lot of leaders in industry and business stepping up, but a lot, are silent. Right. They, they kind of took a step back and maybe aren't willing to face reality or be willing to take a leadership position whereas before, when everything was great, it was easy to lead, but these days it's really hard. There's a lot of uncertainty. So big question I think a lot of my audience would have is trying to take the role of teacher, right? Like all the kids are home these days. My wife is knee deep in it. She's not a trained teacher. Most parents in the county are not trained teachers. So a lot of frustration on both sides, both from the kids and from the parents. So what advice do you have for parents these days?
So my advice is, I'm finding is sometimes not that popular. But I think it's crucial when we look at this whole picture. So my book is called Homework: A Parent's Guide to Helping Out Without Freaking Out, which, I didn't know I was writing that book with the idea that literally all work would be from home.
Yeah.
But I think when we look at this specific issue that we're dealing with right now, with the time period we have, it's May 13th right now. We've got till June 10th. My biggest advice to parents particularly is don't sweat this. don't let it pull your hair out. If your kid is unmotivated and doesn't want to do the work, it's probably going to be okay if they don't do the work, especially all of the work.
Right.
That there's a lot of pressure on parents to perform at a teacher's level.
Yeah.
And they've never been trained for that. There's a
Right.
lot of pressure on teachers to provide instruction without being there live. And they had no training of that either.
Right.
This is just a recipe for disaster if we focus too much on trying to produce major outcomes with these kids. Don't sweat it. Let them sleep in occasionally. We have been telling parents of teenagers that they are sleep deprived for decades.
Right.
And now they can get 10, 11,
right.
maybe sometimes 12 hours of sleep. More than 12 hours of sleep is not good for anybody. But, my advice to parents right now is don't worry so much about the performance. Just try to be encouraging, try to be like what I call a shoulder to shoulder conversation where you're saying to them, I get what this is like for you. I understand how hard this is. And this is so frustrating and so unmotivating. So you're kind of trying to join with them, but then at the same time being able to say, but we've only got a few more weeks. What can we do to power through this? So trying to, use the leadership style of motivation, versus like being the boss where you're just telling them you have to get this done.
Yeah, that's a tough transition for a lot of parents, especially in Loudoun County, because everybody's pretty competitive, right? I mean, it's a competitive group of parents out there who are worried about their kids falling behind and not keeping up. But the reality is that the entire globe, right, global economy is shut down, and really there are very few people who are getting ahead of your kids right now. So
yes, exactly. And those kids would have gotten ahead of your kids anyway.
Right. Right.
There are those kids. And you know what? If you have a kid that's super motivated and excited and wants to buckle down, good for you. You know what? We're all jealous. But most kids are not. Even, kids that were doing really well in school before all this happens, their motivation has just been sucked out because brain power to focus on the wrong things, that it's so difficult to be able to perform at that level.
Sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about social distancing and, our need as humans to connect with people on a physical level. Like when I run into a good friend, I usually hug him or her, right? I'm that kind of person. I find it hard not to reach out my hand and shake hands with somebody that I just meet. I feel like I'm being rude when I don't. So we're losing all those cues, right? We're losing that ability to make connections. We're in our homes, and a lot of people are struggling with that, some worse than others. So what advice do you have for those that are at home and they don't have anybody?
Sure. So we know that physical touch, there's a reason we're drawn for that, and I hate to be kind of a biology nerd, but, there's what happens when we physically touch another human being is both of us release a little bit of oxytocin. And oxytocin is the intimacy hormone. Kind of makes you happy, makes you kind of feel warm and fuzzy. That's why you feel that, that feeling is a chemical response. So when we then remove that, that we're not shaking hands with people, we're not giving people hugs, it is this deficit of this hormone, this oxytocin, this feeling of connection. So the only suggestion that I think that works right now is just hug your family more. Spend some time, if your kids will tolerate it, stroking their head, stroking their hair, giving them a hug in the morning, just to be able to connect physically. It helps you and it helps them.
Yeah.
The thing about, kids and social distancing right now is, we don't really think about, like when they're at school, we're not thinking about what they're doing, but they are connecting so much with other kids. And we've pretty much taken that away. The first few weeks of this, I think we tried to figure out, like, how do we get them to Zoom their friends more or to connect with their friends more? And, either they're doing that or they're not. But, they're there's nothing similar to like sitting around and just hanging out with your friends, sitting here and
Yep.
doing this, I've had some teens tell me, yeah, I tried a Zoom call with a few of my friends and it was just weird because we never sit around and just stare at each other and talk to each other, and there's no, what I call grist for the mill. There's nothing happening in people's lives. So
I like
they
that
can't be
term.
like, did you
Say
hear
that
what
again.
so-and-so said in class? Or, I can't believe the teacher said there's none of that, so there's this major deficit with that. But I think we need to keep that in mind as parents, is that they're really going through significant withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah. Neil, how are you doing?
Well, I'm stressed.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the first week or so of this, I, along with many of other small businesses, went into panic mode
Mm-hmm.
and wondered, how is this gonna pan out? Can I transition to an online practice? And
Mm-hmm.
if I can transition to an online practice, will people actually utilize it? Will my clients that I've been working with for quite a while, will they adjust to this?
Have
Because a
they?
lot of the work I do is couples work and family work. So there's
Mm-hmm.
more than just one person in the room.
Right.
And so I'm thinking, how are they going to react to that? How much am I going to be able to see on a tiny little screen what's happening in their room? But I've been pleasantly surprised that, I am probably busier than ever at this point. Many clients that I had previously have come back, and said, we need some help at this point.
Good.
So, so the clinical work is pretty busy. I really miss the other parts of my work. I miss the community services board. We're literally not allowed to meet, since we are a board that is proscribed by state law, and we're not allowed to meet, unless we have public input and public forum.
Right.
So we haven't figured out that yet. And I'm not doing my presentations, which I really, really miss. I
Of course.
realized that a couple of weeks ago. I just missed that energy of being around parents and having a back and forth conversation. I've done a couple webinars. I'm on the Ryan Bartell Foundation, which we work towards reducing teenage suicide
Mm-hmm.
and helping resiliency. And the webinars are fine, but you just can't get that, the sense
Sure.
of connection with people. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
So Neil, where have you been eating takeout these days? You have any good recommendations?
So I've been doing Andy's, which
Andy's
is
in
right down
Leesburg. Yeah.
right down the road from me. We've been doing a couple of pho restaurants, in town.
Uh-huh.
When Yummy Pig opened up, I think we were one of the first. I was one of the first deliveries.
Yeah.
I called them because they were just right across the street from me here on Catoctin Circle
Right.
before they moved. And so when I found out they opened, I'm like, okay, I need you to. Here's my order, and I need you to put it in the back of my truck in the parking lot, because I was with clients the whole time. And so they did. So I came,
Yeah.
I came downstairs into the parking lot, with bags full of amazing barbecue.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I've done a
So,
couple of Tusky carryouts as well. So
for the people that don't know, Yummy Pig actually moved from Catoctin Circle to downtown Leesburg. So,
yeah.
that was a rough time to transition for sure.
Yeah. And they're doing delivery, and they literally have a window on the sidewalk that they're doing like carry out windows right there. So that's awesome.
Oh, that's perfect. Neil, what's something that you miss these days that you're actually surprised that you miss it so much?
I'd say trying to connect with people more
Uh-huh.
closely. Like, I like, connecting in the town of Leesburg. I like being
Mm-hmm.
able to know, like the name of the, checkout woman at Safeway. I like to be able to smile at people, and the eye contact, when you're wearing a mask, the eye contact is just so odd because you're
It's tough.
trying so hard to communicate. When I went into Andy's the other day, I ended up saying hi really loud, because I felt like they have no idea what kind of mood I'm in, because I don't know if I smile with my eyes, I can't see that. So I guess I missed that piece of it, just being able to connect,
Sure.
and just spend time with people. I
Yeah.
pretty typically would go out to coffee or lunch with either colleagues or friends a couple
Mm-hmm.
times a week.
Right.
And I just miss that, hour being able to spend with people and just letting the conversation wander to whatever it wanders to, and
Yeah.
then wonder, well, how did we get on this topic?
Right.
That's harder to do. One is, you have to schedule a Zoom meeting, you have to kind of be there, and it's never as just, a free conversation as it is. So
Yeah, because there's always this delay, right? It's
yeah,
like even in
yeah,
this
and you're not doing
conversation,
something else. You're not eating a meal together. So much of
right.
what we do as humans is what's called parallel. Where you're parallel doing something together, and you're just letting the conversation, go.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know,
Well, Neil, you and I are going to have to grab a meal there here when this is all over, at least a beer or a cocktail. I remember meeting you a few years ago at Casino
yes,
when they
yes,
first opened up the Mexican restaurant in downtown Leesburg. So
that would be awesome.
Let's agree to meet for lunch here, and
It's a
once
deal.
this social distancing
It's
is
a deal.
relaxed
Yes.
a little bit. Neil, for those who might want to know more about you or to reach out for some help with counseling with their kids, with homework, anybody who's struggling with stuff like that, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Probably the easiest way is, online. Just to, Neil and McNerney is McNerney. And generally, if you get close to spelling that right, my name will probably pop up. I'm on Facebook as well.
Yep.
I love being able to connect with people on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty well connected with the therapists in the area, and I know who's got some openings and who doesn't. So I'm always happy to help people find the right fit, for somebody.
Sounds good. Neil, thanks for joining me. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Yes, sir.